Hello, everybody. This is Nick Pon, and I am the Artistic Director of Collaborative Arts Institute of Chicago. And we are here for yet another episode of Heard Over the Piano. And today, we're going to shift our focus towards some of our educational programs that we have planned for the fall of this year. And I'd like to introduce two of, my co-hosts today, CAIC co-founder and Director of Education, Shannon McGINNIS, and also our guest, Michael PECAK. By the way, Michael, did I pronounce your name correctly? I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's pronounced PECAK.
PECAK.
So as we'll learn in the lecture on Saturday, that in Polish, the C's make a TS sound in IPA. So.
That's right. Nick was just a perfect example of why we need a Polish workshop.
Exactly.
So it's very well done.
I'm so glad that I accidentally demonstrated that so perfectly for everybody. So, oh gosh. One note to everybody watching, if there are any sound issues or any questions you have, please put them in the comments. I will be doing my best to monitor the comment section of this right now. So if you need to chime in, please chime in there, and we will do our best to address, well, we'll definitely answer any of your questions, and we'll do our best to address any technical issues that might arise. This is the magic of 2020 and the year of Zoom. So, Shannon, would you like to tell us a little bit about this tradition we've had of having workshops that are centered around language?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. You know, so the first big workshop that we did as CAIC was in 2012. This was not a language-focused workshop, but it was a workshop that lasted for 3 days. Essentially, focused around Dalcroze eurythmics for the voice. It was led by a wonderful friend, teacher of singing and author, Timothy Caldwell, who wrote a book called Expressive Singing, Dalcroze Eurythmics for the Voice. So that 3-day event way back a number of years ago really sparked our interest in hosting events for singers and pianists eventually that would go beyond just the traditional masterclass, but allow us to really dive in deep on some issues and training opportunities related to singing and to song. From there, we invited, a couple of years later, we invited our colleague and former professor at the University of Michigan, Timothy Cheek, who literally wrote the book on singing in Czech, to come give a 3-day workshop on singing in Czech, obviously. And that particular workshop really taught us something fascinating about singers and their language experience. This was a 3-day event. On a Friday night, a group of singers who didn't know each other kind of got together and learned the basics about Czech repertoire, about the history of Czech song, and an overview of Czech diction. And they had been assigned some repertoire in advance. And over the course of the weekend, we all came together for 6 hours of masterclass and intensive coaching. And then on the final day, we're able to kind of present the results of that work in an informal concert. And it was really fascinating to work with singers who were working in a language they had never dealt with before, and watch them really just kind of dive in a way that I don't always see singers do with the more familiar languages, German, Italian, English, French, and Spanish. And that really sparked, I think, all of our interest in seeing what are some other languages we could bring in and really spotlight in this intensive way. So since then, we've done a workshop in Italian song, specifically bel canto repertoire, with conductor Emanuele Andrizzi. And we did a Russian song workshop with Lynn Compass, who is on the faculty at the University of South Carolina, wonderful pianist and coach. And it's been a couple years that it seems like, I think, Michael, that we've been discussing the possibility of doing this Polish song workshop. It's kind of gone in fits and starts. We were all geared up to do it last spring when the world changed overnight. Yeah. And so I'm really grateful that you've been able to make time this fall for us to kind of reimagine the traditional workshop format, but do something that I think will be really successful and interesting to a lot of people, and not just singers and pianists, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've been looking forward to this too ever since we started the conversation. And, you know, it's all the more special, I think, to do it whenever, but it's all the more special to do it specifically here in Chicago because of the rich Polish community and Polish traditions, specifically in this city. I guess now actually to kind of add a silver lining, I suppose, to a lot of, you know, what's transpired in 2020, in a way, actually is kind of nice because it allows us to reach an even broader audience now.
Absolutely. Yes.
So yeah, I'm thrilled for it. And I'm grateful to CAIC for your continued interest and support in this project as well.
Likewise, we're excited about it. Should we tell you a little bit about what we're doing, Nick? How the format will be? I don't know. I mean,
yes, no, that would be great. Tell us about how the format. The big thing that we're obviously, you know, that we have coming up most immediately is what's happening next week, right? So maybe we could describe to everybody what that's going to be.
Absolutely. So in normal times, quote unquote normal times, these workshops would be centered over the course of a weekend, right? We would really go all in the span of 72 hours or so. Obviously, this won't really work that well for us since we can't all be in person. So we're going to kick things off a little differently this year. Next Friday, Saturday, November 7th, from 5 to 8 p.m., Michael will be leading a workshop for a lecture in Polish song and I'll let Michael tell us about kind of the different sections that you'll be kind of covering during those 3 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first installment of this workshop will be, as Shannon says, it'll be a lecture, and it'll be divided into roughly 3 parts, each of which about, 40 or 45 minutes in length. And the way I envision the lecture is first, I'd like to speak just kind of very generally about the historical and societal context that a lot of the core Polish art song repertoire originated in. So specifically talking about the 19th and 20th centuries and kind of starting to bleed into a bit of the 21st century. But yeah, so the historical circumstances of Poland in that time, because in the 19th century, Poland didn't exist on the map. It was partitioned 3 ways between Russia, Prussia, and Austria-Hungary in 1795, and then didn't reappear on the map until after World War I. So that's almost 2 centuries of official non-existence, but of course the culture was still very much alive, and then composers, artists, and poets during those 2 centuries really made it their objective to transmit and to grow and develop Polish culture, despite the challenges, the political and societal challenges of the time. Because officially well, first of all, Poland didn't exist. So how does the fact of growing up in a non-existent country affect a composer like Chopin or Miesha, and then later composers even like Szymanowski or Karłowicz, and later on. So just that fact alone has a huge impact on artists throughout that whole time.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, so that was so that's part 1. In part 2 of the lecture, I really intend part 2 to be kind of just a really general overview of some of the key composers from, let's say, Chopin's teacher, Józef Elsner. So Józef Elsner was the founder of the National Opera in Warsaw. He was the main composition teacher in Warsaw in the early 1800s, and famously he was during Chopin's youth. So starting with, sorry?
We lost you for 1 second, but you're back. It's good.
Oh, I'm back. Okay, good. So yeah, so starting with Elsner and then kind of moving our way forward, and really what I would like to present to our audience there is just kind of the key composers from those roughly 2 centuries, what works are available for singers, and where to find them as well. So talking about, you know, like publishers, where, you know, who's actually published this music. I mean, a lot of this stuff is, you know, fairly accessible in Poland, but outside of the country, it's a little bit harder to track down. So I just like to offer people some resources about what's out there, where you can find more about this repertoire, what the repertoire is, and I don't know, perhaps some recordings and important interpreters of this music nowadays. So there's actually quite a nice team of Polish singers kind of dominating the opera halls and concert stadiums of the world today, who have made it, you know, also kind of their mission, or part of their missions in their careers, you know, to really disseminate the knowledge of this repertoire and make it known to people. And then part 3 will be devoted specifically to the lyrical diction of the Polish language. And so this part is really intended specifically for singers who are interested in how to sing this language and how to navigate all of the seemingly impenetrable consonances that this language is famous for. You know, if you think German is consonant heavy, just wait until you sing Polish.
Michael, I said those exact words to a student today. I was kind of driving the point home about, you know, the necessity of pronouncing every single consonant sound in German, and she sort of I could see her just getting over, you know, over the top. And then I just said, you know, just wait until you sing in Polish. You haven't seen anything yet. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I suppose, you know, Polish is notorious for that fact about being very consonant heavy, but then, you know, it's really interesting. Some of the historical sources about singing in Polish, like beginning actually with some of the treatises that were written by Józef Elsner in the early 1800s, and I'll talk about these in the lecture. He actually goes so far as to say that after Italian, Polish is the next most suitable language for singing.
Wow.
And so
that's a bold statement.
Yeah, it's a bold statement for sure, and it's one that hopefully I'll unpack for people a bit in my talk on Saturday. So that's a little teaser for you.
That's fantastic.
So we have one, if I can jump in for 1 second.
Sure.
We have one question in the comment section, which is, can non-musicians attend this workshop to learn about Polish history and musical history? And it sounds like yes, like 2/3 of it is going to be devoted to those very topics. So yes, non-musicians, please tune in.
Yeah, totally. I mean, granted that the focus of this lecture is you know, art songs specifically, and speaking about but it's also going to be about the language and the poetry of the time, the poetry that these composers were setting, and why that's important. So really, it's non-musicians more than welcome. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I'm most excited about our kind of the new way we've imagined this for this season. So just to kind of pick up and give the rest of the overview of how things will work for those singers and pianists who might be interested in joining us and seeing where this leads. We'll begin with this lecture next Saturday that, as Michael so beautifully described, will be a wonderful overview of the history and of the repertoire, notable composers, and then wrapping up with a discussion and an overview of lyric diction in Polish. And then fast forward to December, mid-December, there will be multiple opportunities for individual coachings with Michael. These will be for singers and pianists anywhere in the world to kind of come in and join via Zoom and receive some coaching on any repertoire that they may be working on or interested in pursuing. And then moving forward into January, after the new year, our plan is to present a masterclass, much in the same format for any of you who were able to tune into Myra Huang's masterclass as part of the Collaborative Works Festival. Michael will work with singer and pianist teams on Polish repertoire. So ideally, a singer or pianist who would be interested in participating in the masterclass would come to the lecture for that overview, have an individual language coaching with Michael in December, and then perform repertoire in the masterclass in January. And we'll be posting some specific details on the website here in the next day or two, so we'll have some more details available for you, but that's the general overview. So we're sort of stretching things out over a few months, but I think that will allow us the opportunity to really reach a number of singers and pianists in an inclusive and interesting way. So that's where that is.
Thanks for that outline.
Mm.
We will definitely have that up on the website in the next 36 hours or so.
Wonderful.
So please
Perfect.
be sure to visit caichicago.org.
Great. So, Michael, Polish song. Tell us where this interest in Polish repertoire and song in particular came from for you. Where did that begin?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, for me, it started very organically, I would say. I mean, it really started in my home because I'm first generation American born. Actually, both of my parents are from Poland. And all of my extended family is from Poland, but then they emigrated in the early 80s and made America their home, as so many people did during that time. And so I grew up speaking, and still do. We still speak only Polish at home, but both my younger brother and I, we grew up speaking Polish, reading, writing, going to Polish Saturday school, all through high school. So really, I was just ingrained in the language and the culture. I mean, even actually before I probably even learned English, I think. So the stories go that I was speaking Polish before I learned English, and grew up very much bilingual in that sense. But then also having the benefit of going to Polish Saturday school, which here in Chicago is such a big thing. There are numerous Saturday schools of that sort. And that allowed me to really learn about the history and the culture and language, specifically the grammar. And yeah, so it just really opened up my eyes and made me appreciate the culture of my roots, really. I mean, much more thoroughly. My father was a musician by training, a folk musician back in Poland, and then brought that back here to the States and formed bands and played weddings and christenings and parties and things like that. And so that then naturally led to my study of the piano. And then, you know, you put two and two together, and it's inevitable that, you know, sooner rather than later, I would have been learning, you know, Polish repertoire and Polish songs. And then because my dad was a musician, we always grew up with music in the house, and a lot of it was Polish popular music and traditional Polish music and folk music from Poland. So that was just kind of the soundscape I had growing up. And as I got older and got more and more serious about pursuing music in my life, then that love and appreciation of culture and repertoire just stayed with me. And I was able to study a lot of Polish music in college. Then I was able to get a Fulbright scholarship to study in Warsaw itself. So I got to study in the Holy Land, as it were. really working with some of the top professors and musicians in Warsaw for a whole year. Came back and received a scholarship position as an artist in residence at the Polish Studies Center at Indiana in Bloomington, where I also was doing my master's at the time. That then led to, at the same time, and we can talk more about this, but I've kind of had a very zigzaggy career as far as my interest in music go. But then once I started getting into historical performance, and I started beginning to think, how can I merge the two, my love of Polish music and art song and historical performance, and taking this historical perspective on things. And that led actually to writing my doctoral dissertation specifically on Joseph Elsner, his writings about the Polish language and its setting in music, and Polish prosody and how it impacts the way composers write, Polish composers write, and yeah, so here we are now doing a workshop on this. So I guess that's kind of the most direct route I can paint about my interest in this repertoire.
Terrific. This was a really nice segue into something that I've always found fascinating, which is the role of language and the formation of a national identity, political identity, and the role of language in how a composer writes, even non-vocal music. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that. What makes Polish unique in that regard?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, this was something that really occupied the thoughts of a lot of philosophers and artists and thinkers in the 18th and 19th centuries. I mean, Jean-Jacques Rousseau writes in one of his works, you know, just about the shape of the prosody of a language and how that affects the music and how it affects, you know, people's kind of subconscious and how they, you know, probably even without realizing how they approach composing music. Because I mean, the fact of the matter is that languages do have shape and they have prosody and the way you stress words and don't stress words. And I mean, there's a rhythm to languages that will naturally bleed over and affect the way, you know, then you write a melody. So I mean, one specific thing that writers specifically in the 18th century and 19th century, like Joseph Elsner wrote about, that makes Polish distinct, is this idea of stressing the penultimate syllable. So this seems to be kind of a unique thing to Polish. I mean, I'm sure a lot of other Slavic languages have this quality too, but specifically in Polish, it's oftentimes the penultimate syllable that gets a big stress. And so then in setting that to music, that often leads to certain types of cadences appearing here and there, you know, at important structural moments within a song. What becomes interesting is then, you know, when a composer decides to deliberately go against the quote unquote proper setting of the language, because oftentimes it's very carefully and very cleverly done and then gives the music just another kind of flavor. I'm thinking specifically of some of the songs of Chopin that he wrote, which we'll talk about in the lecture on Saturday, where he actually very consciously goes against the quote unquote correct setting of the text. But then, you know, within the, say, for example, the mazurka framework of a particular song, it just adds another element and another layer of richness to the song, because now not only do you get the handling of the text and the prosody of the Polish language, but then you also get this injection of dance culture and Polish dance culture, like mazurkas and polonaises and krakowiaks and all these dances that have particular choreographies affiliated with them. So it really kind of, it takes on a real multi-layered, well, yeah, it just becomes very multi-layered and really, really fascinating. And once we understand and learn how to identify these elements in this music, then it just, all of a sudden, all of these colors and possibilities jump out from us, from the score.
That's wonderful. I love how you describe that. And I love that you bring home this point of language on its own is already musical, right? It's already music. And then the layering on of another music adds such richness when we're aware of both of those things, right? And all
Absolutely.
of the multiple layers. It's really, and it also spotlights what a challenge singers face in managing multiple rhythms simultaneously. I really do believe that. Nick, you probably you feel that experience. You're someone who's so deeply involved with language. You're so wonderful at that, but it's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's totally a challenge. You have to kind of, it's multitasking of the highest level, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's so disorienting when something is on the wrong syllable, you know, when you know it. And also it underlines the importance of needing to, like, this is why it's so important for us to, you know, not just know what each individual words mean from our Nico Castell translation book or whatever, but to actually have a sense of the language, because it really does give you a sense of the rhythm of the language and the music of the language. And I mean, so much more, which is why, I mean, I always joke that it's so much more homework to do something like a language like Polish when you really don't speak it and you really have had so little exposure to it, which is why this workshop's going to be so fun.
The other thing I would add, I mean, but this applies, this is a broader comment. It's not unique necessarily to just Polish repertoire, but I mean, say, for example, the Viennese Waltz. I mean, how do you notate, you know, the schwung
Right, right,
of a Viennese waltz. You don't. I mean,
right,
you see three even beats on the page, but yet there's this whole culture
right.
underpinning those notes, and it's very much the same with a lot of this Polish repertoire. I mean, we see the like dots on the page, but yet underlying them, there's an incredible richness and just a wealth of subtext. I would say.
Absolutely, it's fascinating. I also am interested, if you don't mind, I mean, I love language, and so I hope you don't mind staying on that topic for a little bit. But can you talk a little bit about the role of language and identity? You know, you were talking, I don't want to give too much away because we want people to come to the lecture. I'm thinking about, you know, a country that doesn't officially exist, yet there are people who are Polish, right? And I think about the Germanification of much of Central and Eastern Europe during the time period in question, and what does it do to, I imagine poets wrote about this, right? Using their language and being able to write in Polish and disseminate literature in Polish must have had some sort of revolutionary quality to it in some ways. Can you speak to that a bit?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Especially around the time when Chopin was born. This was still that time, 1810 was his birth year, and around that time, I mean, that was still very fresh after the partitions.
Mm-hmm.
As we get into the teens and the 20s of the 19th century, I mean, this becomes, as I've said before, it's kind of a really defining project of a lot of artists in the intelligentsia at the time. I mean, it's not for nothing that at the same time when Chopin was a teenager in the 1820s, when we start seeing the rise of the first, dictionaries and lexicons of the Polish language written by Polish thinkers and writers of the time. It's also, I mean, let's also bear in mind this big fact that all throughout this time period, the early 1800s, and all through the 19th century for that matter, I mean, Poland was under intense censorship. So anything that the censors didn't like or felt was too patriotic or dangerously patriotic, shall we say, they immediately put a stop to that. I mean, this applied to opera, to concerts, to the theater. So a lot of that culture went either underground or to the salons of like-minded aristocrats and well-to-do families who had salons. And this idea of salon culture as being kind of a hotbed of revolutionary thought and patriotic thought and culture was a huge thing during that time. And Chopin was very much in the middle of it and grew up in it. It's around a little bit later in the 1800s with, for example, Moniuszko, we get what's in Polish, it's called the śpiewnik domowy, which means
I'm sorry, say that again.
It's called the śpiewnik domowy.
Of course,
so,
of course.
The śpiewnik domowy would translate roughly as, like, say, the home songbook.
Okay.
And this is a 5-volume collection of songs, both, I mean, fairly straightforward songs. We get some more sophisticated songs in there. We get some church hymns. We get more folksy songs. We get more pure kind of artsy type songs, more abstract songs. But it's really just this big compendium of vocal music, and it's really the first significant type of collection of its kind in Poland at the time that really formed the basis of a lot of patriotic thoughts and sympathies and a lot of the imagery, both historical, real, and imagined, of the time. This is how people absorbed not only their own culture and their own history, but then also how they were encouraged to propagate that culture. Because then all of a sudden you not only have these volumes of songs that deal with topics of patriotism, about the country, about the homeland, metaphors about the working the land, missing the land, about mothers and laments and all of this imagery that's in these songs. And where was I going with this? I'm so excited. I actually
it's wonderful.
But this was the first significant collection of its kind, and really formed the basis for a lot of revolutionary and patriotic thought throughout the century. In kind of the original iteration of this workshop, a number of the participants who were going, I selected a number of these songs precisely from this Moniuszko collection because I felt that it's just too important of the source to pass up for a course like this, because a lot of these songs are still very well known today, and a lot of people still sing them, in one guise or another.
It's really fascinating. I was thinking about how this trajectory of language and nationalism and patriotism, really, it's quite similar. You could tell a similar story in the former Czechoslovakia and in Hungary, right? That's so much of this kind of upheaval. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not for nothing, that these. Poland wasn't the only country experiencing these types of difficulties at the time, certainly. Right. So, but I mean, now we have this rich collection of, cultural items that we can still appreciate and still, contemplate and apply today.
It's wonderful. We were talking about some of the composers that you'll introduce us to, and it seems to me that a number of them we could probably categorize as underrepresented in some way, not only by virtue of their working in a language that not all of us work in all of the time, but who are some of the significant composers that you'll introduce us to, and why are they significant? Who do you, if you could pick just a handful that you really wish we knew about that we don't know enough about, who might they be?
Sure. Well, I mean, certainly if we're talking about Polish arts, I mean, we can't avoid, not talking about Chopin, because everything, for as far as
all
Polish
roads
music
lead.
goes, I mean, all roads kind of lead back to Chopin. So I'm just going to leave Chopin at that because, everybody knows Chopin, and thankfully so. But Chopin's immediate successor, I guess, in Poland was Stanisław Moniuszko, who became the most important opera composer in the middle of the 19th century, wrote very much in a romantic vein, formed basically the idea of really a national opera, and two of his most important operatic works, Halka and The Haunted Manor, are still performed basically on a weekly basis in Poland. So I would say those two composers for sure, but moving beyond that, one composer I especially love, and who I think, to answer your question, everybody should know, is Mieczysław Karłowicz. Karłowicz was a composer who only lived 32 years, kind of towards the end of the 1800s. He was born in 1876 and died in 1909, if I remember correctly. So 32 years old, and died tragically in an avalanche while hiking in the Tatry Mountains in southern Poland. But wrote maybe, off the top of my head, I think probably maybe about 25 or so art songs. And even in those 25 songs, I think they're absolutely just masterpieces. I mean, this is a composer who had a melodic gift that's second perhaps only to Chopin. I would even go so far as to say that. And I mean, he wrote very much in that kind of late romantic vein. I mean, being very much influenced by like Tchaikovsky and Wagner, as so many people were. But I mean, the harmonic and melodic gift of this composer is just extraordinary, and the way he sets text is so poignant and beautiful. If for those of you in Chicago and New York, maybe you recall from, I think about 2 years ago at this point, but the famous Polish tenor Piotr Beczala gave a recital about 2 years ago, one in Chicago, one in New York, and he included a set of Karłowicz songs, and they're just superb. I mean, just some of the most gorgeous music of any time, of anybody.
I remember those songs. Martin Katz played that recital.
Yeah, Martin Katz.
Yeah, I remember.
Exactly.
So beautiful.
Exactly. So he's a composer I was really excited about when we first started talking about the idea of this workshop. I was like, oh, great, we get to
finally.
Give Karłowicz his due. And I mean, he wrote, the art songs are incredible. Also, as a composer, he has a beautiful symphony in E minor to his credit, a violin concerto, and several other orchestral works, a tone poem. and things like that. And you hear that same kind of melodic richness and harmonic gift in those works. But yeah, specifically the art songs are just second to none. Beyond Karłowicz, I mean, we have to speak about Szymanowski. I mean, he's the other biggie as far as Polish composers go. I mean, oftentimes if people know Polish composers, they will know Chopin for sure, and then most likely Szymanowski afterwards. So now we're getting into the 20th century, and he was a composer that really absorbed also just a lot of the traditions and trends of his time. I mean, real harmonic boldness, and interest in the Far East at that time, like so many other composers. I mean, with the Middle East and with Asia at the time. So he sets these really Eastern influenced or Eastern originated texts that were then translated into Polish, and it becomes this really esoteric thing. And I mean, very, very captivating music, and yeah, just really almost kind of psychedelic, I would say. I mean, some of these song cycles that he's composed, incredibly difficult. I mean, both for the singer and certainly for the pianist. I remember some of the most difficult piano music I've ever played were the piano parts in Szymanowski songs. But yeah, really captivating, really incredible, rich music. I also wanted to make it a point to highlight certain female composers.
Thank
by
you.
Poland. That was important. Yeah, that was an important point for me with constructing this masterclass, both as far as speaking about them in the lecture, but also the repertoire offerings. I mean, some of the key female composers that we get in the Romantic era, like Maria Szymanowska, who is very much a contemporary of Clara Schumann. We don't have a whole lot of surviving music by her, unfortunately, but we know she was actually quite a prolific composer and a very gifted pianist, and actually made concert tours all throughout Europe and into Russia. There's one song in particular that I was hoping we would cover in the masterclass at some point, called Chitagenko, which is it's a difficult word to translate, but it essentially translates as the mermaid of the lake Svitesh. Oh. So it's this very evocative song, strophic song, but yeah, the text is just very evocative, and it's set to this kind of barcarolle type accompaniment, and just really lovely, kind of quintessential early Romantic style writing. Later composers, I would include first and foremost Grażyna Bacewicz. So now we're very much in the middle of the 20th century, so like the 50s, 60s. She, interestingly enough, was actually known first and foremost as a violinist and a composer for string instruments. So she wrote a lot of great chamber music and music for string ensembles and things like that, but also just an incredible pianist, judging by her piano writing, because she has this incredible piano sonata.
Yeah, I played a toccata of hers in college. Yeah,
yeah, the toccata of hers is fantastic, and just it's really just very idiomatic piano writing, and yeah, terrific stuff. But she wrote a number of art songs that are just fantastic. One of them is a particular favorite of mine. The name of the song is Boli mnie głowa, which means my head hurts. And it's an absolutely hilarious song. Actually, the text was written entirely by her, but it's only one line, Boli mnie głowa, and all these various guys. And people, if they're interested, can search this on YouTube. There are a couple of great performances of it, but yeah, just a great sense of humor in her music, but also just a real seriousness of purpose at the same time. I mean, that happens to be kind of a silly song, but we get a wealth of other art songs in her output that just show a really forward-looking composer, someone who really took to the neoclassical kind of trends at the time, but also wasn't afraid to experiment harmonically and rhythmically, and just beautiful settings of various poets and texts. So Bacewicz is definitely a favorite of mine. Locally, I would also want to give a shout out to Marta Ptaszyńska from University of Chicago. She's also written some art songs and is just a major composer on the scene to this day. And so yeah, I don't know. I hope I didn't just give away my lecture.
No, I'm sure but you whetted our appetites for sure.
Great. Good.
Terrific.
Perfect
Excellent.
preview.
Yeah, I think so. Very good. You don't only teach Polish lectures. You have another life outside of that work. So tell us a little bit more just about yourself and your work outside of this lecture that you're presenting on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
We lost you.
Do you have my? Oh, hello.
There you are.
Oh, good. Okay. The way I kind of think about it is I have my hands in a lot of cookie jars, admittedly, as a musician, and that's both kind of out of personal need and desire and by design. But I mean, I'm active as a conductor. I mean, that's really, if I could just describe myself first and foremost, I would say I'm a conductor. I work a lot in opera, but cut my teeth in opera working as a rehearsal pianist and a coach. And so working as a repetiteur in different companies, all through college and all through my higher education, I've worked with singers. Yeah, just always surrounded by singers. Everywhere I studied, I was always in the vocal studios, accompanying and coaching and working with the opera departments. Now, happily and thankfully, I'm doing more and more conducting here in town. The music director of the Chicago Citywide Orchestra, which is the longest running community orchestra in the city. And we've done some very exciting projects with them. So there I get to kind of satisfy my love of the symphonic and orchestral repertoire. And then, yeah, I'm also a historical performer. That was what I did my doctorate in, was historically informed performance, and I'm an active forte pianist. I have a beautiful replica of an 18th century Viennese forte piano that I like to use, and do solo repertoire, and then collaborations with my partner and girlfriend Hannah. And yeah, so I'm kind of, I like to do a lot of things, but it's really just because I've always been obsessed with music, and I'm obsessed with music from a variety of different angles. And so hence all of these different pursuits throughout my career.
That's terrific. And those who tuned in to the masterclass I mentioned earlier with Myra Huang few weeks ago were fortunate to hear Hannah sing beautifully to one lovely song, and Michael at the piano as well. It's wonderful. So nice to hear you both. It's terrific.
Thank you. Yeah. No, we love that experience. That was great.
That's great. And I know that you and Hannah and others have been doing some performances kind of virtually since March. And I think you have some things coming up pretty soon as well. Tell us what you're doing soon.
Yeah. I mean, again, both out of the need and the desire to stay active with music. Yeah, actually, we've both Hannah and I have put together some really exciting virtual projects ever since the pandemic hit. We did a virtual Beethoven recital from earlier this past summer, where we did Die Ferne Geliebte, among other things. That we collaborated virtually with some friends and colleagues of ours on other repertoire. Now coming up on Monday, we have a broadcast of a Schubertiade that we recorded for the organization Les Délices in Cleveland, and that'll be exciting. That was a collaboration with tenor Kareem Suleiman and baritone Jonathan Woody, and Hannah, of course, and me on my forte piano. So that'll be broadcasting this Monday evening. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, other things that I was doing, I mean, I was speaking of the orchestra that I lead, actually just in our own effort to kind of keep the music going. We've been holding outdoor rehearsals all through September and early October when the weather was still nice, and I managed to rehearse several pieces, and we're putting together a virtual concert of that project that we've been working on. Oh, what else? Yeah. So yeah, happily, like we were saying kind of before we started, just keeping happily busy.
I admire all of my friends and colleagues who are finding ways to keep it going. And I don't know if people out there understand or know how much more work It
Oh
is
my
to
God.
kind of, right?
Yeah.
We know all too well, Nick, from the recent
Yeah.
festival. It's sort of the workload has easily tripled, right,
Yeah.
for the same amount of output. So
Yeah. Well, and just acquiring such a whole new skill set in such a short
yes,
period of time, because all of a sudden all of us had to become like expert video and audio engineers,
yeah,
like literally overnight. And
Yeah.
so yeah, you're absolutely right. It's definitely been much more work on the front side.
yep, indeed.
But like you say, we have to do it. Like it's out of a
Yeah.
personal need. We don't.
No, it definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Where can people find out about this upcoming recital? Is there a website that people could visit?
Yeah, for sure. If people are interested, they can search Les Délices and also Salon Era series. It's one of the series that they put together when they've revamped their whole program to go virtual. So the website is salonera.org.
Mm-hmm.
And there they can find more information about the upcoming Schubertiade, which will be this Monday evening at 6:30 Central Time, 7:30 Eastern Time, both through Facebook and on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then of course the lecture we have coming up
Yes.
on the following Saturday here, which I'm
Saturday.
very much looking forward to.
Yes, we are too. It will be a fantastic way to kick off some educational activity for the fall. It's terrific. Great.
So Shannon, you and
Yeah.
you really explored some Polish song earlier.
I
this
really
year.
did. Yes, I was fortunate to participate in a series of concerts that Nick Pon curated for the Philadelphia Chamber Music Society that explored a whole host of repertoire from Eastern Europe, Central Europe, variety of things. But I played these 6 songs of Paderewski.
Mm.
And so that was my first experience with Polish. And of course, as a pianist who wants to do a good job for singers, I'm always trying to sing and play. And so I had to teach myself a little bit of Polish and grappled with all those consonant sounds and palatized consonants and the whole 9
Right.
yards. It was great though, a lot of fun. You know, I enjoyed getting to know the repertoire and the, as you mentioned earlier, just the really incisive and idiosyncratic rhythmic makeup of the songs, and it was great. It was a fun experience, but I don't know if I've recovered yet. I used muscles in my face I didn't know I had.
Oh yeah. Oh, you definitely will.
You know?
Yeah, Polish will be a workout for everyone's mouth and palate and everything.
Yeah.
It's funny. I felt bad when I programmed those. I was like, someone else is doing these, not me.
And Sarah Schaefer did them
She did.
beautifully. Yes, such a beautiful singer. She made it sound easy, for sure.
What was so interesting for me researching all of that was kind of digging into this history of like nationalism and language and how these countries were all, using those tools to promote the sense of nationhood in a time when they didn't have one. And it's interesting that you were saying a second ago that Poland shared so much with, it did share so much with countries like Hungary and what became Czechoslovakia, and is now the Czech Republic and Slovakia. But Poland, it seemed to me, it suffered really big defeat. It was a kingdom, and it was a pretty powerful kingdom in its own right. And then suddenly it was part of 3 different countries, and so many artists had to go into exile, and Paris was obviously a place where a lot of them fled, and like Chopin, all roads lead back to Chopin. But I'm really looking forward to hearing more, because I was dealing with a whole bunch of like all of Europe, so I'm really looking forward to hearing and learning more about specific Polish history.
Absolutely. Yeah, and every time that there was an attempt to kind of regain any sense of what's the word I'm looking for? Just a sense of self by the country and some liberation. It was unfortunately always squashed, but then and necessitated such exiles, like famously in around 1830, when Chopin and Mickiewicz and all the other big artists and intelligentsia of the time fled to Paris, most notably, of course. But then, you know, I mean, that also just lends a whole interesting element and atmosphere to the music and to the poetry of the time, because it gives everything just such a an underlying urgency. I find like even with Chopin's most seemingly restful and tranquil works, there's always something bubbling under the surface. It's never totally all right, because he's always thinking back to his homeland, and he was very much an exile, but by force, and begrudgingly left his family and suffered tremendously from it. And yeah,
it's fascinating. Can't wait to hear more.
It also struck me that,
tune in on Saturday.
Yeah, seriously. I was just going to say, it also struck me how uniquely important music was. I mean, it was important to all cultures, but you know, this idea that Poland would choose for its first prime minister a pianist.
Yeah, Paderewski, signed the Treaty of Versailles, no less.
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament to how much that cultural. I'm not going to say propaganda, but cultural, you know what I mean? Links and was relied upon. It's pretty...
Sure. Well, I forget who said this now exactly. I feel like it was Arthur Rubinstein, or I may be misremembering this, so everyone out there, please forgive me, but some famous pianist or musician said that, you know, if people really understood Chopin's music, they would realize that it's really canons in a field of flowers.
Interesting. Yeah.
Maybe it was Schumann. I don't remember now. Sorry.
No, that's a great quote. It's interesting. Awesome.
It is interesting to think of that music as canon.
Right.
It's so delicate and beautiful.
Yeah.
Right.
Very finely wrought canons.
Right.
Yeah. I think we need more of those kinds of canons and less of the other.
Yes, totally.
I would say. Excellent. So in my list of questions for you, Michael, one of the questions I had was what was keeping you busy and inspired during these difficult months? But I think you've answered that. You're staying super, super busy, just making music. And what are you doing outside of music, if anything? Are you guys baking bread?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've certainly, Hannah for sure has explored a lot of the sourdough trends that have arisen through quarantine. We've definitely been making a lot of music together. I guess one of the most pleasant things to come out of the quarantine experience for us is the adoption of our new dog Teddy, and who we adopted. I guess it was late June at this point now, but yeah, he's been an absolutely delightful new member to our family, and definitely has made the experience more enjoyable, or at least serves as a really welcome and beautiful distraction for us. So yeah, we love having Teddy. We've explored new TV shows. I don't know if I'm allowed to plug any specific shows on this format, but yeah, Orphan Black is a great one. Highly recommend it.
Okay.
Succession was great, and recently we've been watching this show from the BBC called Last Tango in Halifax, which is just really delightful and really kind of interesting love story. Also highly recommended. So, yeah.
That's great. I love it. You know, there's something about our pets that we have a miniature poodle, Harpo, and just having to take care of something, right? That's just so he's not aware of what's kind of going on in the world. He just has to do what he has to do every day. Yeah. And it's really grounding in a way, right? That
absolutely
we have them to take care of and look after. So I think we're so blessed, I think, to have them in our lives.
He's currently looking at me from his pillow nest on the couch here. So
what are you doing? Yeah. Oh, fantastic. It's great. Good. Well,
it seems like we only had the one question. We have a lot of thumbs up and love little situation
Great
like
thumbs
things
up.
happening.
Oh wait, I think Teddy wants to say
Oh,
hi.
and Teddy!
Sweet.
Oh, here he is.
Oh,
Hi.
oh, what a sweetheart. Look at those ears.
Oh my
Oh my
gosh.
goodness.
Yeah, all the better to hear our music
Right?
making with.
I love it.
Yeah, but here he is.
Does Teddy enjoy when you're making music at home?
Oh, honestly, we haven't quite figured it out. Usually he tends to actually go in the other room whenever we're practicing. So I don't know if that's an endorsement or an incrimination of our practicing, but
That's funny.
yeah.
Oh, what a sweetheart. I
Yeah,
love
you
it.
know how to work the
Work the
communicator,
camera,
Teddy.
that's right.
Yeah.
Our dog Harpo, whenever I'm practicing, or if I have singers, or when I used to have singers in the house, his favorite spot is directly under the piano. I think he likes
Yes.
the vibrations. I think they're
Yeah,
soothing
my
in some way.
forte piano. Yeah, we laugh at my forte piano is actually Teddy's doghouse because
Yeah,
that's his favorite
exactly.
place to chill out or to play with his toys. And
Yep, same. Well,
So,
fun.
our wonderful executive director has tracked down the quote, and it was indeed
Oh.
Schumann.
oh, Schumann, good.
nice.
Okay.
Yes, the quote is, now that the Poles are deep in mourning, their appeal to us artists is even stronger. If the mighty autocrat in the north could know that in Chopin's works, in the simple strains of his mazurkas, there lurks a dangerous enemy, he would place a ban on his music. Chopin's works are cannon buried in flowers.
Wow.
There you go.
Oh, that's
There it
It's a
is.
good one.
Oh,
Good old
fantastic.
Robert with his way with words. Fantastic.
And thank you, Nick Hutchinson, for tracking down the quote for us.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Were there any other questions from anyone?
No, everybody seems to be excited and looking forward to your lecture next weekend. So,
Fantastic.
so that lecture is happening on a week from Saturday, correct?
Mm-hmm.
It's 7 p.m. Central.
5
5 p.m.
to 8
Central.
p.m. November 7th from 5 to 8 p.m. So we'll do 45-minute segments. So part 1 and then a little break, part 2, and then we'll publish all of that on the website as well as the Zoom information coming up here shortly.
And there will be opportunities for people to ask questions too. So
Great.
if anything comes up, yeah, I'm happy to field any questions.
And I would encourage people, that's dinner hour and cocktail hour. So bring one of each and feel it's informal and a nice opportunity to sit there and be kind of inundated with knowledge and expertise.
Absolutely. Maybe some pierogi or gołąbki
Oh,
or something.
of course.
Just to
Wonderful.
keep with the theme of the evening.
Gosh,
Great.
this is a missed opportunity, guys. We should have had planned menus,
Oh, that's sweet.
Suggested menus.
Next time.
Next time.
It's something to keep in mind for future programming.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and then this will continue next week as well. So we will have another episode of Heard Over the Piano next week. Shannon is going to host. She's going to take the helm. And we're going to continue on our exploration of CAIC's educational adventures. Do you want to give a little preview of what we're talking about next week?
Sure. So another one of our hallmark educational initiatives is called the Vocal Chamber Music Fellowship. This began 6 years ago now, I believe. And so next week we will be visited by a couple of former Vocal Chamber Music Fellows and also our current Vocal Chamber Music Fellow. Long days, you all. Vocal Chamber Music Fellow. And we'll just talk about a little bit about that initiative and some of the projects that our fellows have been involved with in the past, and also hear from our guests about what they're doing in their lives. They're all still involved in making music in a variety of ways. I think it's always interesting to revisit, kind of see where people are headed in their careers since they've left us. So I'm very much looking forward to reconnecting, and all women. So that's a fun thing also, never a bad thing, to spend some time with some really thoughtful, intelligent, entrepreneurial, talented women. Excited about it.
Well, great. Thank you both very much for today's chat. And thank you everybody for tuning in, Facebook, and we will see you in a week. Okay, so everybody take good care, and we'll see you soon. Great.